Host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome today to the InnovaBuzz podcast, all the way from Rockville in Maryland, the USA, Farzad Rashidi, who's the lead innovator at Respona. And it's the all-in-one link building and digital PR software that combines personalization with productivity. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Farzad. It's a real privilege to have you as my guest.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, Jürgen, for having me on the show.
Now, you also run the marketing efforts at Visme, and I think there's a story behind that where you helped the company gain over 12 million active users just using organic traffic and natural kind of natural outreach and link building mechanisms, and past 2 million in organic traffic. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that some more and how that gave birth to Respona. Now, before we do that, what's the impact you're making in the world? What's the legacy you hope to leave?
That is a great question. What I like to say to answer that is to help other online businesses sort of be able to break away from some of the giant tech corporations that are guzzling cash and paid advertising, and help them sort of build a following and be able to create an organic level of traffic to their website. And that's something we pride ourselves in, is to kind of help businesses build through content marketing a well-established brand.
Great. Well, and yeah, there's I think advertising had its place many years ago when it was perhaps quite cost effective to buy clicks effectively, right? Buy people clicking on your website or your ad and then going through to your website. But these days it's so competitive, and particularly for certain segments, that unless you really get huge boosts in traffic and business as a result, it can be a big waste of money.
Absolutely, yes. It's absolutely bonkers, the cost per clicks of paid ads nowadays. And it's getting more expensive by the day just because there's limited ad spots, and they use a bidding system, so it goes to the highest bidder. So over time, that sort of increases over. Yep.
All right. So tell me a bit more about how you achieved that amazing result at Visme and how that gave birth to Respona.
Sure thing. So I started my career in marketing, Jürgen, at Visme as the first marketing hire. And I'm sure you've heard of Visme, Jürgen. We chatted about this already. Yeah. But for folks who are listening who haven't heard of Visme, it's an all-in-one visual content creation tool for brands. So say you run a business, you want to create presentations, infographics, any sort of visual reports. Visme is a tool that's made predominantly for businesses, compared to Canva, that's more of a B2C platform for everybody. We focus predominantly on small, medium-sized businesses all the way up to enterprise companies. And I joined as a first marketing hire, and the company is still up to this day completely bootstrapped, and we never raised any outside funding. Today we have around 100 employees, close to 100, I would say 90 something. And about 14 million in active users. We're up 2 million since we chatted, Jürgen, and about 3 million in monthly organic traffic. So didn't get here overnight, for sure. And the process, sort of, when I joined the company, the product was very solid, and it was a bunch of engineers and designers who had basically created this really cool looking product. And back in the day, obviously we were one of the first infographic design tools that were sort of out in the market and trying to get market share. And as a bootstrap company, we didn't have the hundreds of millions of budget and paid advertising that a lot of our competitors had. So we're like, all right, they handed me this product. They were like, all right, Farzad, go sell this thing. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So because the product was sort of priced in a way that obviously paid ads would work. We invest a little bit in some retargeting campaigns, some specific things that we do, but it's not a very scalable way for us to get an evergreen flow of customers, just simply because, as I mentioned, there is a diminishing return on investment on paid ads. So as you, for example, when you double your budget, doesn't mean you get double the conversion. So that's right. The cost per acquisition normally catches up with lifetime value pretty quickly, and that sort of goes down over time. And the price point of our product was built in a way that is very affordable. I think at the time we were like $15 a month or something like that, and still around the same on our base plans. And it's not a price point you would hire salespeople for and go sell door to door, right? It just doesn't make any economic sense. Unless you're selling a product that's like thousands of dollars a month, it wouldn't make sense for it to go door to door. So we had to quickly figure out a way on building a acquisition channel, really, that we wouldn't have to pour all of our cash into paid ads, and at the same time make it scalable enough so that we could grow the company over time. And that we knew from day one, sure, that it's going to be SEO, because let's put yourself in the shoes of a customer. So let's say, Jürgen, you want to create an infographic for one of your episodes tomorrow, and you don't already have a solution for that, and you're looking for a product. What's the first step you do when you're looking for a product to solve that problem? What's the first step?
Yeah, go search online.
Online where? What website? You go. First step.
Oh, usually Google. Yeah,
Google.
Go
there you go. Exactly.
The biggest search engine. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. So most people, again, that's not true of every company, but in our industry we knew that people are Googling in order to come across a product or service like ours. We're like, okay, well, if we position ourselves to show up in places where people who are looking for a solution would naturally come and find us, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than us having to go after every single customer and chase after them to sell them our product, if that makes sense. So we're like, okay, great. We know that we have to invest in our SEO and we need to optimize so that we show up for our certain keywords. Now, we're like, okay, great. We've heard of content marketing. Let's go ahead and put together, or let's pay some writers to write some articles, do some keyword research, optimize our website, and build these landing pages. And we did all of that and put it on our website. And guess what happened?
Not much.
Nothing. Absolutely crickets. And we're like, well, this is quite discouraging, because obviously, as a small company, you spend a lot of resources on something, you expect it to work immediately. So I was like, all right, well, we obviously are doing something wrong here. So I basically pulled up, and Jürgen, if you have access now, if you do me a favor, just go ahead and actually open up a little incognito tab on your browser right now and look up one of our keywords. Look up, for example, presentation software. I'm doing this right now as you're doing this.
Okay.
So right below the search bar, not sure whether you see how many search results pop up. You see how Google says, here's however many search results there are, and we found it in there.
Yeah, well, mine's showing up the Windows software as a series of icons in the top row, and then the first search result after that is Visme.
Oh, got it. No worries. So for me, I'm seeing, does it tell you how many web pages contain that keyword? In Australia, so you may be seeing something a little different than I do.
Yeah, I've probably customized my search a lot.
No problem. No, it's all good.
No, it's
Did you open it in a new incognito? That's why I said that, so your previous search history doesn't display the results.
No, I'm on the latest beta version, so I don't know what's different.
No problem. It's all good. So let me tell you the number. It's about 3.5 billion web pages. That's what I'm seeing right now. So there are 3.5 billion with a B search pages or web pages that contain the keyword presentation software. And what do you see right now in Australia? You mentioned after all the ads. What do you see in the organic search results?
Yeah, I've got underneath the Visme, which is at the top, it's saying people also ask what is presentation software and examples, and there's some other questions there. And
gotcha. So the top search results is Visme.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay, well, that's lucky. Normally it fluctuates a little in the top three, but that's great. You folks in Australia.
And we didn't set this up before. We didn't plan this up beforehand. Just
not
so
a pro.
You know.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, search results fluctuate. But now, what you're seeing right now, Jürgen, is a tip of the iceberg, because it takes a considerable amount of work to create enough topical authority for a website to start ranking for this keyword. So what we quickly had to realize was that having content on your website was not a nice to have, was a requirement or a necessity, but that's a base level step one foundation.
That's
it's
right.
not so you start writing content, do your keyword research, option on your website. Congratulations. So does 3.5 billion other people that have the web page presentation software.
That's like your table stakes, right?
That's exactly right. And then, so what we had to figure out, we're like, okay, let's say we're in the top 1% in terms of quality of content. All right. So you hire the best writers in the world, best designers in the world, best WordPress devs in the world, and you create this really good looking piece of educational material. You put it out there, and if you're in the top 1%, right? It's a very good assumption. You're still going to be in the millions of search results, right? So we had to figure out a way, okay, how do you go about that 10 millionth search result all the way up to top 10, which get over 99% of clicks, all right? And the way we figured this out is Google gave us the answer. And so the way Google beat all the other search engines back in the late 90s was basically by developing this algorithm called PageRank. And contrary to like Yahoo and AOL and a bunch of other search engines that were in the market, the way PageRank works is that they basically rely on backlinks, meaning mentions of your website by other people's website as a ranking factor, so that not only you rely on page metrics, which is what's on your website, but you also say, okay, or you also go and research, okay, how popular is this web page? How are other people talking about this on other websites? And that becomes interesting, isn't it? Because now you can't really cheat the algorithm, because now you have to go and convince other people to actually link back to your website. And that's how they sort of blew everything else out of the water, because the quality of their search engines was very high. So we're like, okay, great. Let's go get some of these backlinks to get our website to be more popular and get up in the search result. And that turns out it's a little more difficult said than done. So we were basically doing everything manually and kind of sort of trying to find relevant publications in our space and finding the right person and reaching out to them and collaborating with them. And I was insanely...
Just to emphasize the point there was a period probably 10, 15 years ago where a lot of people were automating this particular area, and there was a lot of so-called black hat techniques, which is frowned upon and can result in a ban from Google, which means you're at the bottom of that list of how many billion, or maybe you don't even show up in that entire set. And what you were doing was the proper way, which is organically building those links by asking people essentially, that this is relevant to what you're talking about in your website. Can you reference our article?
Asking people is not the correct term here that I would use, Joran. I would say collaborating with people in a way, because there's also a ton of spam emails that you get. I'm sure you get a ton of these every day. It's like, hey, I come across a blog post. Can you link to us? And that's as good as just not sending that email in the first place. So it's still a very new industry. A lot of people are still trying to figure out exactly how to do it. And then obviously they resort to spamming when they're not quite as experienced in the space. So it's okay. Over time, they'll understand, hey, this is probably not the best way to do it, because it just doesn't work. And then the black hat techniques was the same way. At the beginning, they were trying to kind of create a lot of user-generated content, like on social media, and then they would link back. And so Google introduced different tags, so what we call no-follow tags. So anyway, comments on the blogs and stuff, forums, they all become no-follow, so they don't actually help you with any of that. So what actually ends up moving the needle are natural links from relevant publications in your space, and they have become insanely good at picking those out and actually putting more weight on them. That's why it's very, I would say, impossible almost to cheat the algorithm long term, because they also are releasing updates every day. So the really scalable way you can do so over the years is by actually building relationships in your publication with publication in your space. And it's insanely difficult. It's not supposed to be easy, and I'm not trying to advocate that it's easy. But what we did at Visme was a completely manual process. So just to finish the story, what we did was to put together the whole thing under one roof, onto our internal software, and to kind of sort of automate a lot of the dirty work, the manual tasks, so that we could focus more on personalization, actually building relationships with people. And that triggered the idea of Respona, and that's how it just worked extremely well. We cut around 80% of our average cost, and we're like, guys, this is awesome. So we decided to release it as a separate product, and that's sort of how Respona was born as a separate product out of Visme.
Yeah. All right. Well, you mentioned there, and I just want to highlight this again, that you talked about building relationships. And so it is very much about doing something online and giving the search engines information that really relates back to what business is all about. In other words, building relationships with people that in this case refer back to an article that you've written, where they're talking about the topic of presentations, for example, and they say, well, here's an article about presentations that's relevant to what I'm writing in my article. And so that's a natural backlink. But it is about building that relationship where it's relevant and it's organic. And so tell us what was the part that, and what does Respona do that takes away the manual, repetitive work and
that's right,
allows more time to build those relationships?
Of course, absolutely. So Jürgen, what happened was that at the beginning when we were experimenting with link building, we were doing exactly as you're saying. We were like, okay, let's find some websites that mention our keyword. Let's reach out to them and say, hey, we released an article. Can you link to it? And 99.9% didn't reply, and one person replied and said no. So why would I take time out of my day to come link to you? I have other things to do. So what Respona does in particular is automating a lot of the dirty work in the research process. So let's say, hey, if you have a web page you're trying to build backlinks to, so there's a 4-step process within Respona that helps. And again, you can do all of that pretty much manually yourself. So not here to say, hey, you need Respona if you need backlinks. You can do pretty much all of these steps yourself, manually yourself. It's just Respona here to save you time. So you can do what you do manually, but 10 times faster. But it basically helps you first identify what are some of the right websites that you will need to reach out to. And we have an outreach strategy hub. So that you need to, that it's actually open to the public, it's ungated. So if you guys are looking for link building strategies, different ways on how you can approach link building, you can navigate to our website, respona.com, respona.com, and you can go ahead and actually at the very bottom of the page, we have our outreach strategy hub. You're going to maybe something that actually is worth including in the show notes. And it's ungated, it's free, open, and you can go and follow that process yourself manually. And one of these strategies, by the way, is podcast outreach, which is what I'm doing right now. So I can dive a little deeper into one as an example. So I'm building a backlink from your website, Jürgen. That's all I'm doing. That's what I'm doing right now. So we can jump a little.
Right. And you actually reached out to me through Respona. And
that's right. Yes.
I guess you found some articles or some posts we had that were relevant.
Right. We have a podcast engine. That's right. So Respona basically has an automated engine that helps you find, based on the strategy to pick, the right websites, the right companies to reach out to. And then it will also automatically find the right person in charge at those companies. And also automatically finds the contact information of the right person, verifies the contacts, make sure they're deliverable. And then puts together the emails with the automated follow-ups. So now the last of what you need to do is to actually add the personalization. So you automatically insert variables, but then you can also add a human touch to your emails, mentioning something that they've talked about. If it's a podcast, what they talked about in one of the latest podcast episodes, if they written an article, what they talked about in the article, connect with them on social channels like on LinkedIn, and have that multi-channel approach along with level of personalization and incentive that's included. And so you click run, and it basically automates the sending action for you. So a lot of the dirty work, manual research is kind of sort of automated within our platform. What the part that is not automated, we combine it with human touch. And so that's where you sort of add that level of human interaction in there. So it doesn't seem like a spammy person. I'm sure you get a ton of these pitches every day, Jürgen, from people who are trying to get on the podcast. And sort of we're here to battle some of that.
Yeah. Well, I love the philosophy around it, and I think it's a great example of where we can use technology. I always say that in today's world, there's so many examples of people abdicating to the technology, and any kind of personal touch disappears because they abdicate all the connection to the technology. And I think what you've outlined there is a brilliant example of using technology to take the repetitive, not necessarily personal touch stuff out of the equation, automate that so that it saves a lot of time, but then adding that personal connection, that human touch, that is just so important in business today, right?
Exactly. That's right. Mm-hmm.
So essentially, Respona then identifies where are relevant websites that either have a podcast or an article or some other content, identifies who the contact people are, gets their email, gets their social media addresses, which is all kind of public information. And,
That's right.
And sometimes I know when we're having guests on the podcast, I sometimes spend quite a lot of time trying to find that information when when I recognize that that's probably something that could be automated so that I can spend more time on getting to know the person that I'm going to talk to and having that meaningful connection. Yeah.
Sure.
Is that correct? Yeah. Is that the process?
Absolutely. Let me actually walk you through the strategy, how I got this interview. I think it would be interesting and quite relevant. Yeah. So what one of our team members, Dylan, shout out to Dylan. Thank you, Dylan. He basically fires up Respona. Again, the process I want to walk you through, you can still replicate a lot of that manually. So I want to be very clear in that you don't have to purchase all these fancy tools to conduct any sort of outreach. It's just going to take a little more time, but what's important at the end of the day is that you get it done. Now, what he does, it basically finds podcast episodes that have interviewed somebody in our space. And so what he does is that he goes on Respona and looks up our podcast episode search engine, and it looks through iTunes automatically. And again, if you're not using Respona, you can just do it manually, right? Just go on iTunes and find podcast episodes that have interviewed someone in your space. And you will also run that podcast through some data sources to find, okay, how popular is this podcast, right? Obviously, you want to make sure that you keep a sense of relevancy. And I'm not sure whether you noticed, actually, Jürgen, but your podcast actually ranked in top 2% globally through our data sources.
That.
So
I saw that recently on Listen Notes. And so,
that's right, yes. Congrats, that's awesome. And I'm not surprised. Your interviews are great. But what he found is that, hey, I found this really good interview, and I believe it was something around LinkedIn outreach and about personalized outreach through LinkedIn. And now, so he used that episode as a hook and basically responded then when found your contact info, got the emails and social profiles, and it built an email template. And so it was all ready to roll. And what Dylan did, he actually referenced your episode that he found you by within the pitch. And he said that, hey, actually came across your interview with X, Y, and Z person, and noticed that, you guys talked about LinkedIn automation and whatnot. And that automatically tells you three things, because one, these podcasts accept guests in the first place, because not all podcasts do. Two, it means that podcast is actually relevant to your space. And three, is basically making our life easier when it comes to pitching, because we can use that episode as a conversation opener and actually personalize our pitch based on that particular episode. And he went ahead and contacted you, and I don't believe that you responded to him right away. So a week later, Respona automatically noticed and sent a follow-up email in the same email thread. And then you responded and said, hey, thank you so much for the kind words, yada, yada, yada. He put you in touch with me. Damn. We got on the show. Yeah. And that's pretty much it as far as the whole outreach process. Now, this is what we call the podcast outreach, something I try to do as often as I can. Obviously, I'm also limited with my time, but it's a great way not only just to get backlinks to your site from these show notes on the podcast host, but also meet great people in our space. We're buddies now, Jürgen. We've met each other and be able to figure out some ways on how we can collaborate and help each other out. It's a great way to meet smart people in your industry, build relationships with relevant publications, and also you get free advertising to a niche audience. So people who are potentially listening to this podcast, not expecting everyone to go immediately sign up for Respona, but you've heard of Respona now. You've heard of my name. Now, come across a blog post down the line, you've heard of Respona. It's one of those 7 touch points as you, go through that customer journey. So, and also you get a backlink to your site. So this, again, is just one out of a gazillion different strategies we experiment with and do. And I just wanted to walk you through that. Hey, you don't have to go spam people if you're trying to build backlinks to your website. There are better ways you can do that.
And I think I'd just like to highlight the process you've gone through there. And, as someone that teaches people how to get on other people's podcasts and how to pitch in a genuine, authentic, human way that builds connection, you've actually nailed it there. And leaving aside what you can automate and what value Respona adds to that, because it's saving you a lot of time in identifying who to speak to, which podcasts to approach, and so on. And there's specifically for podcasts, there's other tools around that you can use which act differently to Respona. They're more like directories where you can search particular niches.
Right.
But the process is what I highlighted. And when you said I didn't respond straight away, that wasn't because the process, your pitch didn't attract my attention. That was probably because I was overwhelmed by email at that time.
That's right.
What I tell people, what I'm looking for in a pitch is that people they've actually listened to an episode. They actually know the show is about. It's actually a relevant guest, and they've taken the time to determine that it will be a relevant value add to my audience, and that certainly was the case. And by opening up hey, we listened to your conversation with, and I can't remember, there were several people I talked to about LinkedIn outreach, but about LinkedIn outreach, and gave me something that indicated not only did they just read the title,
that's right,
but they did listen to at least some part of the episode because they referenced something in the conversation. So that to me is somebody that is generally interested in coming and adding value. And coming back to what you said earlier about partnerships, that's something. So you're saying we can come and add value to what you're doing, and in return, of course, you don't even have to ask for a backlink here on podcasting, because
that's right. Yeah,
that's the way you would have seen that on the other posts we do. That we do have lots of backlinks to various websites and social media areas of that particular guest.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And then that's a very important thing, Jürgen. I'm glad you mentioned this, that you shouldn't go out and ask for people to give you something. Just like how you don't go to a grocery store and ask the person in the grocery store to give you stuff. It's just not how the society works. So you need to provide value and receive value, and that's how you form mutually beneficial collaborations. And that is true of link building, as it is in any other aspects of business, is that you form collaborations and partnerships with publication in your space. So, for example, in this case, I am spending an hour of my time coming educating your audience, and you get a guest, and we got an episode out the door. That's great. And at the same time, so it's something that both sides are benefiting from. Not one side is ripping another person off or trying to extract as much value as they can. It's something that we both help each other out. And again, this podcast, as I mentioned, is one out of a few dozen different strategies that we experiment with, but all of them kind of sort of adhere to the same principles.
Yeah, and I think that's really key here is this principle. And the thing, I mean, there's more. Like I'm going to land a whole lot of backlinks on to this episode, because I'm sure you'll be posting in social media.
That's right. Yes.
To highlight that your appearance on our show, and so I end up with a lot of backlinks as well. So it is a genuine partnership, and you didn't even ask. You didn't even have to ask for the backlink. And in addition to that, you mentioned it earlier, we've kind of become friends. I've learned a lot already in the conversation today, and hopefully we'll continue to have these conversations in various forums.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. And we can talk also about a few different kinds of strategies, because a lot of people are like, hey, maybe I'm in an industry that may not make sense for me to go on podcasts. For example, another simple strategy Respona helps with is what we call for example, Hero. And that is it's a free newsletter you can go and subscribe to today, and it's basically journalists that are writing stories that need quotes from experts in a certain field. So let's say if you're in the crypto space, for example, and you run a crypto startup or you run a commerce store, doesn't matter. And there's always some journalists that are writing stories that need some insights from people in the industry. And there's a free newsletter that is hosted by Cision called Hero. And what you can do is that you can subscribe to Haro for free as a source, and you get 3 emails a day every day from Haro, and obviously it's filled with journalist queries. So each one has like hundreds of queries or questions in there, and from different publications. And so you can read through and find these. And Responder, we have an automation feature that sort of keeps an eye out for any ones that trigger a certain keyword that's relevant for you, and then it puts it nice and tidy under one roof, so you can go and it's sorted based on deadline, and the ones that expire like exit. So you can kind of have it easier to handle, but then you can actually go and answer people's questions that are asking, hey, for example, I'm looking for crypto experts to explain what's happening with Bitcoin prices lately. Why is it down 40%, right? And if I run a crypto startup, I most likely know a lot about it, right? So I want to respond to that query, and if they like it, which 1 out of 10 do, we get a major news publication site, and they cite you and your website in there. And there you go. Here's another backlink, right? So it's what we call the Haro automation strategy, where sort of you want to proactively respond to queries from journalists or writers that are contributing pieces to specific publications in your space. I can keep on going on, but that's another simple strategy I wanted to share today, is that even if you're not using a platform like Responder, there's a lot of free ways in how you be able to sort of proactively look for these opportunities.
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier about the document that was there in terms of the backlinking. Does that include some of the ideas that you
Both
sharing?
of them are on there. That's right. Haro, podcasts are on there. I can keep on going on if you like.
All right. Well, I think I just want to say that, this principle of adding value somewhere else in order to get the backlink without necessarily asking for the backlink. It's just natural things like, there's an example of a place where people are asking questions. They want to know things.
That's right.
And if you have an answer to that, then answer that question, and automatically you end up being kind of seen as the expert in that particular area, and you get that backlink. But it's a very natural kind of process, and what Responder does is essentially simplify the ways where you can find those sources.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Another cool example we did, I think that back in the day was, so it was more PR, I would say, than link building per se, but it was, have you watched Game of Thrones, Jürgen? The series Game of Thrones?
No, I'm not into Game of Thrones, but there's been enough talk about it. I kind of I've got some sense of what it's about.
Just sense of what it is. That's fair. I still haven't watched the last season because people keep spoiling it for me, so I'm waiting until I forget, until I watch it. But anyhow, so before the last season came out, a lot of people were like, okay, who's going to win the Game of Thrones? So, there was years of build up. And Visme at the time, I was still the director of marketing, was is a database tool. So we create visuals, right? So you can visualize your data. So what we did was to take some of the data from a betting website that people were, hey, here's a character that I bet on, and just visualize it in a nice little infographic. And we were like, hey, this is great. Let's reach out to journalists that have covered Game of Thrones in the past week. And then we can use that article as the hook and say, hey, Jürgen, just came across an article on Forbes talking about Game of Thrones. And by the way, our team of Visme just visualized this infographic covering who are people betting on in order to win the Game of Thrones. And that article, that campaign generated about 60 or so media mentions from like very high top tier websites like Forbes, Pop Sugar, Men's Health, like you name it. They're major magazines that mention us. And we were like, okay, well, that's great. I mean, literally took our team a couple hours to put it together. And the outreach also with Respona took like 15 minutes. And that there we go, 60 media mentions. Now, if you just imagine if you were to hire a PR firm to get 60 major media mentions for you, that would cost an arm and a leg for a business. Yeah. But a lot of that stuff could be replicated either with Respona or manually.
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot of really innovative ways there to actually reach out to generate those backlinks, not in a way that you're not actually saying backlinking is the strategy here. It's really just building those connections in a human way and adding value to those other sites. So it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Well, this is fabulous, and I think people should visit your website and have a look at some of the other case studies that are there and the examples in that document you referenced, which of course we'll link to in the show notes. I think it's a good point now to move on to the buzz, which is our lightning round, the 5 questions that we ask of every guest. And the idea is that you'll give us some tips that will inspire the listener to go and do something awesome today as a result.
Sounds like a plan. Let's do it.
All set. What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Relax and unwind. All of my innovative ideas come from when I'm not working. So I go and take hikes, in the shower. It's good to disconnect sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. It's, and I often have to keep reminding myself of that when I'm under quite a bit of pressure, in fact, or need deadlines or have a difficult problem to solve, and I'm here at the desk just, I've got to break through.
Be innovative. That's right.
Yeah, that going away, going for a walk, or in my case, a lot of times it's a bike ride, and take a half hour, an hour, maybe even more, and come back, and then usually it's, that's the solution, and I'm much more effective.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I would say talking things through with my team. And that's something that I've recently discovered. Unfortunately, we hire a lot of smart people, and there are a lot of smart people in our team. Unfortunately, as a founder, you always feel the pressure. Hey, I need to come up with stuff and tell other people to do things. And it's just simply not true. We have a lot of people in our team that are a heck of a lot smarter than I am. So talking things through with them, always say, 2 brains, 3 brains are better than 1. And we've saved a ton of time and preventing a lot of mistakes by actually talking things through with my team. And that's something that I'm wanting to do a lot more, and ask for their feedback and ask them for help versus me just telling them what to do.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's something that I certainly have to keep reminding myself of too. It's sometimes, I can ask other people. And
that's right.
Is it... sometimes we feel like that's a sign of weakness. If we kind of admit that I don't really know the way forward here, what do you guys think?
Yeah, exactly, absolutely, and that's something take some getting used to. But I feel like I've never had any team members like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. They always are very appreciative that you actually care about their ideas and are asking for their opinion and actually acting on them.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing is to then actually acknowledge the ideas and act on the ones that are good, because it's in everybody's interests.
Precisely. That's right.
Okay, well, do you have a favorite resource you use most often, aside from Respona?
Oh,
that's obviously going to be number
Respona. 1, right? That's right. So resource as in like an educational hub where people can read more about stuff, or
could be
book.
That could be
okay,
book or anything.
Sure. One of the really good resources I would highly recommend to folks, especially the ones who are just getting started with their content marketing and SEO. Ahrefs blog is a very great resource for people who are getting started. There's a lot of good material there. I know a lot of the content team or marketing team personally. They're very great guys. And we also, their customer, have a very solid platform for keyword research and doing all the on-page optimizations. So Ahrefs blog, I think, is a great resource. Brian Dean has also a really fantastic blog. It's called Backlinko. That's now owned by the SEMrush team, which is a competitor to Ahrefs. and he also puts out really, really good stuff out there. I personally also written a free ebook as well, explaining all the processes that we have at Visme. That is, again, free also if you want to Google Visme marketing strategy. It should be at the top there. And it's a gated content, but it's about 160 pages that I sort of go step by step. Okay, here's how you prioritize keywords. Here's how you write content. And then once you do, then here's how you go out and promote. So it's another good resource for people to take a look at. But yeah, I think, I mean, at the end of the day, you gotta have to start doing and stop reading at some point. So, once you have a base knowledge, you can never just learn all this stuff by reading books. You're gonna have to actually start doing things.
Take action.
Come across problems, and that's right.
Yeah, I love it. So there's key message there is there's lots of resources there.
Right.
Take them and take action with them. All right. What's the best way to keep a client on track?
On track, as in helping them become successful, or
yeah, basically.
So Jürgen, everybody lives in their own world, and my corner of the world was the software industry. So I can only think of in terms of software. And to me, a lot of people in the software business, including some of our team members that I had to battle over the years, is that when as a software company you think of, okay, how can we help our clients become more successful? The first thing that pops into my mind is onboardings, check-ins, calls. And that's just simply not true. If you look at some of the most successful software companies in the world, like, for example, Slack, nobody's sat down and taught you how to use Slack. So it's all built into the product design. That doesn't require you to watch any videos, doesn't require you to go through any onboarding flows, that doesn't require you to have anybody check in with you, really, as a matter of fact, just because you don't need to. And it's so simple and intuitive enough that anybody can pick it up. So that's something that we adhere to and try to do our best to kind of move towards that direction, is to make the product so intuitive that it doesn't require you to help them become successful. Yeah. They help themselves to be successful.
Yeah. So basically make it as easy as possible for the user at every level.
That's right. We're still got a lot more work to do. We're not there yet, definitely, but that definitely a goal for us.
All right. And finally, what's the number one thing anyone needs to do to differentiate themselves?
I want to say authenticity. And that's something that is rarely talked about nowadays. Everybody talks about tactics and strategies. Sometimes it helps to be authentic and actually provide value to people and not actually try to be pushy or salesy in a way. And that's something I've seen worked, and somebody I very much respect in our industry. His name is Rand Fishkin. And he started a company that was acquired and was very successful. And he started a new startup called SparkToro. And everybody just flocked over to SparkToro. We were their customer as well. And it just tells me this guy is just so authentic in a way that his stuff is going to be good just because of the amount of information he shares and how authentic he is. And he's really, truly there to help. And I've personally emailed him multiple times asking him for his feedback and help. And he did, even though he didn't know really what it was, or there was nothing really in it for him. So somebody really that I respect and admire in our space. And I think that's definitely something that is very underrated nowadays.
Yeah. And again, that highlights that connection, that personalized connection, that if you're authentic and genuine and open to those connections, that really does differentiate you.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz. Now, you have mentioned a couple of the links before, but tell us again, where can people reach out and say thanks for what you've shared today, and just remind us of the Respona website and where all those
absolutely
those
assets we
are.
Share no problem. So, but we do have a lot of free content pieces on our website. We are big into education and content, and our website is respona.com. You can just Google Respona or respona.com. And my name is also Farzad Rashidi. I love to connect with folks personally. There's not a whole lot of Farzad Rashidis out in this world, so I'm pretty easy to spot on LinkedIn. And yeah, feel free to stop by and say hi.
Excellent. And as I said, we'll have those links in the show notes. And in fact, if you're in Australia and you do a search today on presentation software, Visme comes up as number one, not Respona. But that will actually somehow get you back to Respona website, right?
or look up link building software. We should be up there with Respona. Yeah. I haven't checked lately, but hopefully we're still up there.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks Farzad. Now, yeah, what action would you like the listener to take away from today's conversation?
Okay, that is a very loaded question. So, one action I would recommend you to do is take a look at that outreach strategy hub I discussed. It's, again, free on Get It, and there's a lot of good stuff in there that we've learned sort of through years of trial and error, and it's going to save you a lot of time. So I recommend you to take a look at that resource as a blueprint of sort of getting some inspiration in terms of doing outreach. And just send one email today to one person through one of these strategies. That's one piece of feedback I recommend. Just stop reading, send one email manually using one of the strategies I talk about in the outreach strategy hub.
Excellent. That's a fabulous call to action that we'll certainly endorse and encourage, and I'll go and do that today as well.
Awesome.
All right. Finally, Farzad, who else should I get on this show and why?
All right. I need to think about it. One person that pops into my mind immediately is Payman, who is the founder of Visme, who is also my co-founder here at Respona. He runs a very successful SaaS company. I think he's got a really, really good story, and he bootstrapped Visme to now close to 100 people and fully profitable. I think he can share a lot of value.
All right. Well, we'll get you to introduce us to Payman and reach out to him as well. So
Sounds
we'll do
like
our outreach.
Perfect.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights so generously today, Farzad, and thanks for reaching out and highlighting this concept of using technology to enable more time to spend on the personalized outreach and building that relationship. And yeah, thanks again. All the best for the future, and let's stay in touch. Let's keep that relationship alive.
Thanks again for having me on the show, Jürgen. This was fun.